Persuasion. That which contracts was first expanded. That which weakens was first made strong. That which falls was first raised up. That which scatters was first gathered up. It is paradoxical, but true. The tender outlasts the rigid. The gentle defeats the strong. Persuasion is better than compulsion. Rulers have nothing to gain through force of arms. That is chapter 36 of the Tao Te Ching. It occurred to me reading this that now, and I'm putting that in quotes, the moment that's happening at this instant, and every moment as it unfolds, is never the beginning. It's also never the end. As human beings, we are always in a state of change. And in this chapter, really clearly, the author gets after the fact. It says, hey, this is not entirely clear. It's paradoxical, in fact. This isn't going to sound like it's the case, because in so many instances, as a leader, as a person in charge of your own life, you have this idea that you need to be acting all the time, that force is what is required to move something forward. And regardless of what your definition of forward is, or as you are seeking to make your life better, that I would say generally, colloquially, is a forward motion. Paradoxically, the tender outlasts the rigid. The gentle defeats the strong. There's some fairly patient explaining going on here to serve as a reminder as we go through every single day that there's an opportunity here. There's a choice to be made. And in many cases, when the choice is made wrong, there's not much to gain from that. This is instructive outside of the leadership manual setting that this book was often used in, or has been throughout history. We're lucky when books are published and they stand the test of time, that we have an opportunity to reevaluate whether or not they're useful to us. This speaks to something that happens all the time in our current society in 2023, where disagreement happens. And there's often a choice to be made whether or not the resolution of that disagreement is going to happen through persuasion or it's going to happen through compulsion. And there's a particular aspect of reality that is important in making that decision, because if there is a disagreement that you are a part of, you get to be the decision maker. You have the opportunity to be the ruler of your own life. There's an Oscar Wilde quote that's important to keep in mind. He says, "It is grossly selfish to require of one's neighbor that he should think in the same way and hold the same opinions. Why should he? If he can think, he will probably think differently. If he cannot think, it is monstrous to require a thought of any kind from him. A red rose is not selfish because it wants to be a red rose. It would be horribly selfish if it wanted all the other flowers in the garden to be both red and roses." I probably should have done that as an entirely different swell, but it's interesting as a tie-in here. As I look more into Oscar Wilde, he was born in 1854, so still before the Tao Te Ching was translated into English. I don't know if he did come across this text. However, this is particularly interesting to consider in light of some of the most difficult arguments we have, which is arguments of love, arguments of passion. Now, Oscar Wilde died in poverty after being found out he was convicted of gross indecency with other men. This is where the role of law comes into practice and is used and has real impact on people's lives. Rulers have nothing to gain through force of arms. Persuasion is better than compulsion. If we let go of that second sentence and focus on the heart of the actual lesson that the Tao Te Ching is trying to teach here, it's that persuasion is better than compulsion. Thoreau said in 1849, another idea arising before the Tao Te Ching came into a language that he would understand, that government is best which governs least, because the government that governs least allows people to experience the greatest values in their life without placing limitations. It simply insists that consent has to be respected by all parties along the way. I've never done a part 2 for a swell, but this seemed like there was enough content here that I felt like I could continue going. It's one of the problems that you run into as you get into this text that has so few words, but has so many opportunities to actually examine how it could be used to make one's life better. I think this is true of any book, but it's much easier to do in these small bite-sized pieces like the Tao Te Ching has presented to us. And what I wanted to bring to the forefront here is that even Taoism is not the thing itself. When we talk about persuasion being better than compulsion, and when the Tao Te Ching lays this out, it makes an argument shortly after where it says rulers have nothing to gain through the force of arms, which is kind of a big leap to make, because as you see that in the short term, for example, Oscar Wilde's situation, yes, there was an interest technically. Someone did gain something by limiting someone else's version of happiness, by putting Oscar Wilde in jail, and the man died broke as a result of his life choices. And even there I'm getting tongue-tied because it's not his life choices. Each person has within them the certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in instances of love, who we choose to love, how we choose to love them, this is an example of how law can really transition between the human nature. It's something that each of the instances, such as Jefferson's attempt to use those words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's not to say that he is defining what life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are. Some of the biggest mistakes that the founders made, and really any government, any system of law makes, is over-explaining, is trying to get detail-oriented on something that, as the Tao Te Ching says, cannot be put into words. An idea that can be expressed in words is not the infinite idea. It's a good idea when rulers recognize that they have nothing to gain through force of arms, regardless of whether or not that is true in the short term or long term, and there's a matter of faith probably there. Obviously, Taoism being a religious practice, though I'd argue it is in many ways more than that, it's a good idea to prescribe to one's followers, and as a principle for long-standing peace, that rulers have nothing to gain through force of arms. There's a natural check there on people who have power, suggesting that they should seek persuasion rather than compulsion. They should seek to respect consent rather than attempting to coerce. And this is something that's absolutely possible. In fact, it's included in chapter 36. It goes back on itself. That which contracts was first expanded. That which weakens was first made strong. All people are constantly in a time of change. It's part of what it means to be human, is to go through things and have the circumstances around them become different, whether that's getting married or having a kid or finishing school or eating lunch or having a sip of water or listening to this right now. Even if there's nothing else major going on, we are still moving through time. Change is still occurring. And rather than trying to get bogged down in what that means, I'm not a physicist. I'd recommend Carlo Rovelli if you're interested in understanding time a little bit better. This is about the opportunity to make a better decision, to live one's life, to have choice, to be able to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's something that capitalism enshrines into law. You have the right to say no to someone else's version of happiness, but you also have the ability to say yes, and to pursue the things of the highest value that'll bring your life health, happiness, satisfaction, literally every single one of the best moments in life. This is what is possible when rulers have nothing to gain through use of arms, when power rests with the people.